Hello, I'm Sarah Coates. Thanks for joining me. Protests have resumed in Israel today with members of the Ethiopian-Israeli community gathering at major roads and intersections against what they're calling police brutality, with 14 people already arrested today. Now, this comes after yesterday's protest with more than 100 police officers injured and another 136 suspects arrested when scenes turned ugly during nationwide protests. The Ethiopian-Israeli community is furious over the killing of teenager Solomon Teka by an off-duty police officer on Sunday, with authorities and Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu calling for calm, vowing to stamp out violence.
We're not prepared to accept, we will not accept, blocking roads and violence, including Molotov cocktails against our forces and burning cars or any other property. We are a nation of laws. We ask everyone to respect the law. We're holding discussions on over-policing, on changing patterns of behavior towards the Ethiopian community. It's something which has already begun to improve, and maybe we need to introduce many more changes.
And for more on this story, let's now go to our defense correspondent Daniel Semach, who is standing by in Tel Aviv. Daniel, tell me, what is the situation on the ground right now? A little earlier, it was relatively calm, but it seems like it's really kicked off now.
Well, Sarah, you're absolutely right. The day definitely started much calmer. It really started with an Israeli security presence here before any demonstration or anything like a demonstration even started. Now we're actually seeming to be at the tail end of it. I won't say that for certain yet, because this could definitely change, but I can say for certain that most of those protesters that were demonstrating here throughout the surrounding area, mainly on sidewalks, not on the street, have left. But as you can hear maybe behind me and see behind me, there is still a very large group here still demonstrating, but they seem to be maintaining a distance away from the street, and that really is what the Israeli security forces have been trying to do throughout the entire day, is keeping this protest on the sidewalk, which is quite difficult to do, especially when we're talking about such a major junction. We're now in the Azriel junction, one of the biggest junctions in the heart of Tel Aviv, an area that where cars are going from north to south. Buses are taking people from the center of Tel Aviv all the way north or all the way south of the country. So definitely a lot of traffic here, and because of that, it's also given steam to the protest. People are constantly walking by, saying something either for the protest, against the protest, supporting the police, attacking the police, and we've been watching that happening before our eyes today, Sarah. And as you said, it definitely started very quietly, very calmly, and then every now and then skirmishes have broken out between Israeli police and border police and those demonstrators. Here alone, Sarah, we saw at least 6 that were arrested. We do understand that now around 14 have been arrested throughout the country.
And Daniel, I know that you've been speaking to a number of people there on the ground, a number of demonstrators. What do they have to tell you? What are they saying?
Sarah, I actually spoke to one of the organizers of these protests, not just the one that happened today, but also yesterday, and also 6 months ago there was a similar instance with Yehuda Biadga. He was also an Israeli of Ethiopian descent who was shot and killed by Israeli police, and that was the subject of protest back then. Now, this individual did not want to speak in front of the camera, but I was curious to hear from him why he felt that there weren't as many people that arrived today. Obviously, there's a protest still happening, Sarah, but it's not even close to what we saw yesterday. Yesterday, throughout the country, tens of thousands of people were protesting. Today here, there may be hundreds. He actually told me that because of that Israeli security presence, because of how robustly equipped these forces were, the Israeli border police as well as the police, with full riot gear from head to toe, riot shields, riot helmets, the whole works, because of that, the people were afraid to come out to the streets. We also spoke to other protesters here who were not of Ethiopian descent, and they felt that the security forces were actually a point of provocation, potentially, for people that were here, that because they were so heavily equipped and so heavily armed, that maybe this could bring about some sort of confrontation between the two sides. And we definitely did see a few instances where that seemed to be the case throughout the day. But it has to be said, if we're looking sheerly at the numbers, Sarah, 14 today for now, compared to over 100 yesterday, and also the day before there were also demonstrations, we definitely are seeing this being marked down slightly. That also might have to do with a meeting that happened happened earlier today.
And regarding that meeting there, Daniel, we know that the Prime Minister convened a number of people to discuss this ongoing situation. Tell me, what were some of the main points that came out of that?
Well, according to the Israeli police, who released a statement after that meeting from the Internal Security Minister, Gilad Erdan, and they said that they have reached some sort of consensus with the leaders of the Ethiopian community. That consensus was that there would be a protest, but that protest would not be violent. And what does not violent mean? Not violent means that they won't be closing the roads, that they won't be attacking police and things of that nature. But obviously, now and then, these things happen. Obviously, as you can see here, now there are not only protesters here, but also a lot of people that are just enjoying the activity and the tension and the scene that's happening here. So definitely an active situation, Sarah, but that meeting definitely seemed to have affected the tension here on the ground.
Okay, Daniel Semach there in Tel Aviv, really appreciate the update. Thank you so much. Staying on this story, and let's go now to our Middle East correspondent, Adi Kopowitz, who is standing by at Kushner Junction in Israel's south. Tell me, mass protests were there yesterday, Adi. What is the situation right now?
So as opposed to yesterday, today went pretty calm here in Kushner Junction. However, it's important to emphasize that this happened thanks to wide preparations by the police. Just behind me, what we can see is a water cannon truck meant to disperse protesters. We've seen over 150 policemen here, including border police cops who came here as additional force and police horsemen. All of these forces were here to prevent any chance of road blocking and prevent the traffic jams that happened yesterday. Just yesterday, a police car was toppled upside down here by the demonstrators. Police decided that today, no matter what, this is not going to happen, and they will control what's happening here, and there won't be any violent riots as yesterday.
All right, Adi Kopowitz there. Really appreciate the update. Thank you. Staying in the region where Israel's Shin Bet security service says it's arrested a Palestinian explosives expert who operated on behalf of Hamas and entered Israel on a humanitarian permit. Now, it's understood Fadi Abu al-Sabah was recruited by Hamas, which runs the Gaza Strip, back in July 2018 and was trained by its military wing for around a year. Now, the Shin Bet says that he was planning on launching bomb attacks and setting up an explosives lab in the West Bank. Authorities say al-Sabah came into Israel through the Erez crossing and was arrested in the Arab-Israeli town of Taibeh in May of this year. Israel's foreign minister is sending a warning to Iran, saying that it will suffer heavy blows in a conflict, threatening that Israel could take unilateral action against the Islamic Republic if needed to keep it from getting nuclear weapons. The comments by Israel Katz coming a day after Iran said that it had breached an agreed-upon limit on its stocks of low-enriched uranium. Now, today Iran's President Hassan Rouhani upping the pressure on the remaining signatories of the Iran nuclear deal, warning the country plans to take the next step to increase uranium enrichment on July 7. And let's go now. I-24 News reporter Yotam Kafino caught up with former Israeli Defence Minister Moshe Yaalon, who's also part of the opposition Blue and White Party. He told him by one way or another, Israel will prevent Iran from acquiring nuclear weapons.
For us, our policy is very clear. By one way or another, the Iranian ambitious aspiration for military and nuclear project, nuclear capability, should be stopped. Having said that, we have to use all the tools available before exercising military options.
Now to Israeli politics, and Knesset Speaker Yuli Edelstein says an attempt to cancel the September 17 fresh elections has fallen through. Edelstein taking to Twitter, writing, "In recent days, I tried to push for the benefit of the citizens of Israel the cancellation of these unnecessary elections, saving us all billions. Unfortunately, not everyone would cooperate, so we're not going to be able to cancel the elections." Now, all of this after Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu failed to form a coalition after the elections in April. And we're going out for a short break, but when we come back, we'll have all the latest on the Trump administration's peace plan and Israel fighting Egypt arms smuggling. Stay with us.
Go beyond the headlines every day on I-24 News. Host Ami Kaufman talks to the news makers and pundits to bring you the story behind the headlines.
Catch The Spin Room, Mondays and Thursdays, 4 or 5 p.m. Eastern, only on I-24 News.
The Middle East. I-24 News is a witness. Our journalists live and breathe there every day. Get all the latest global news from our studios in Tel Aviv, New York, Washington, and Paris. Anytime, anywhere. Download the I-24 News app, available on Roku, Amazon Fire, Apple, and Google stores. I-24 News, see beyond.
I'm Michelle McCory on I-24 News. Join me on Clear Cut, where we cut to the chase with a straightforward yet insightful breakdown of the world's top political and economic stories.
Weeknights beginning at 7 p.m. Eastern, only on I-24 News.
Esta semana en News 24, Paz para la Prosperidad. ¿Qué dejó el seminario realizado en Bahrein y hacia dónde sigue ahora el acuerdo del siglo de Donald Trump? Dame tus pobres, tus agotados y a tus innumerables masas que aspiran a vivir libres. ¿Quién fue Lazarus, autora de este poema inscripto en la Estatua de la Libertad? 88.000 palestinos ingresan a Israel todos los días a trabajar. Los pasos de control eran caóticos, pero algo ha cambiado. Para mejor. News 24, el magazine semanal en español de I-24 News.
Thanks for staying with us. Let's go now to an exclusive I-24 News report with Palestinian sources telling our Arabic language channel that the Israeli Air Force has in recent months attacked several weapons convoys in Egypt's Sinai Peninsula, with those trucks en route to the Gaza Strip destined for Hamas and Islamic Jihad. It's understood the first attack took place on November 10 of last year and the last one in May of this year. And for more on this story, let's bring in our correspondent, Guy Azriel. Guy, thanks so much for joining me. You're in our Tel Aviv studios right now. What more can you tell us about this exclusive report?
Hey, Sarah. Yes, a fascinating story coming from our colleagues at the Arabic channel, and what we are learning from Palestinian sources is about these Israeli airstrikes deep inside the Sinai Peninsula, attacking weapons convoys on their way to Gaza, to Hamas and Islamic Jihad, those terror organizations in the Gaza Strip. What we can reveal is that the shipments included mainly Iranian missiles, and according to our sources, one of the trucks carried materials for the manufacturing of explosive devices. Now, we also know that this shipment originated in Libya and was destined for Hamas. Now, as a result of these attacks, the Palestinian factions in Gaza reduced the transport of weapons coming from Sinai, understanding that Israel must have managed to establish some sort of an intelligence infrastructure from within the Bedouin tribes over there in the Sinai Peninsula. And we also know from our sources that Egypt has expropriated large sums of money that were designated to be transferred through those tunnels.
And Guy, Egypt is prominent in this report. Tell me, what's the connection? What's the cooperation there?
This is very interesting because the news of Israeli operations in the Sinai Peninsula do not come as a major surprise to us. While Israel does not publicly speak about its operations there, we know from foreign reports that Israel has struck over 100 strikes in the Sinai Peninsula just over the past 2 years. This is, of course, very sensitive for the Egyptians. They normally deny these reports. And having said that, there was they deny most of the times, with the exception of one case. In January of this year, Egyptian President Abdel Fattah al-Sisi gave an interview to 60 Minutes American media. In this interview, Sisi admitted to having these cooperations with the Israelis in the Sinai Peninsula. This is a very sensitive thing for him to say. Just a day after the interview, Sisi asked for the interview not to be aired. That didn't happen. He had to swallow that pill. And whether Israel informed or didn't inform the Egyptians, most of the times Israel does so. It lets them know before it strikes. That is not always the case. It depends on the urgency of the strike. But just like the mechanism Israel uses with Russia in Syria, it does notify Egypt most of the times when it goes on a strike.
Guy Azriel in our Tel Aviv studios, thank you so much for bringing us that exclusive report. Let's move now to the Trump administration's Middle East peace plan, and Trump's son-in-law and senior advisor, Jared Kushner, has held a phone briefing with Arab and Israeli journalists, telling them that the next step of the plan, following on from last week's conference in Bahrain, will be announced next week. Kushner adding that the president was very clear that he wants a solution to the issue and made it clear that he would work hard for that, but says the Palestinian leadership will have to enlist and show that it's interested in a better life for its citizens. Kushner going on to say that no plans for economic investments will be implemented before the implementation of a political plan, also blasting the Palestinian leadership for boycotting the conference in Bahrain. Meanwhile, a new poll has been published today showing that 9 in 10 Palestinian Arabs don't trust the US government's claim that the Trump's peace initiative, an economic part of the plan, is trying to improve their economic well-being. Now, it was conducted through the Palestinian Center for Policy and Survey Research with 1,200 people polled. It also shows that 79% of the Palestinian Arab population support their leader's boycott of the Bahrain conference, while just 15% were opposed to that move. And for more on this story, let's bring in our correspondent, Jordana Miller. Jordana, thanks so much for joining me this evening. We've just seen this poll released today. What more can you tell us about it?
Well, I think, first of all, there's no surprise in these poll results. Trust between Ramallah and Washington has never been so low. What I think might be alarming to the White House and Kushner's team is that this poll represents the Palestinian street. And you'll remember that all the rhetoric surrounding and leading up to Bahrain was about doing something for the Palestinian people themselves, improving their lives. And in that, a huge $50 billion plan to do infrastructure projects and build industries and businesses in the West Bank, in Gaza, and for Palestinian refugees in these neighboring countries around Israel. And in the end, this poll is really, if you look at it from what the White House might want to get out of it, it's a shocker, because basically it shows that 9 out of 10 Palestinians don't believe that this conference is really about their economic benefit, and 8 out of 10 Palestinians just about support the Palestinians' position to boycott it. If we look at some other numbers that we haven't talked about yet, 75% believe, that's essentially another 7 out of 10, believe that this economic plan and even the U.S. peace plan in general won't help them at all, will not lead to anything substantial. And this really comes after, 2 years of the Trump White House that the Palestinians have experienced as one slap in the face after the next, from the Jerusalem capital decision to the move of the U.S. Embassy to the funding cuts to the Palestinians and pulling out money from the UN Palestinian Refugee Agency. So we shouldn't be surprised by these results.
Certainly, and we have heard Jared Kushner speaking with these journalists, really spruiking what he calls a successful Bahrain conference. Tell me, what exactly did he have to say there?
Right, so Kushner had held basically a call today with reporters here in the region to do a kind of wrap-up on Bahrain, and he said the White House thinks it was a very successful meeting. They got a lot of positive feedback on their very detailed plan. He said they were surprised that there wasn't more criticism of their plan, which he admitted contained a lot of information that was already out there, but added some new plans. And he really defended the White House's decision to go on the economic front first, saying we really need to give some kind of incentive to make peace and that this will help us. On the other hand, he was quite critical of the Palestinians, saying that they had made a strategic mistake not to show up, calling it foolish, and saying that their responses to the conference were, quote, hysterical. Just a few minutes later in a Q&A session, he said that he still does believe, however, that the Palestinian president wants peace.
Well, it'll certainly be interesting to see what comes out next week. Anyway, Jordana Miller, thank you so much.
Thanks, Sarah.
A square in the central Israel city of Petah Tikva is set to be named after US President Trump, with the city's mayor, Rami Greenberg, announcing that Trump's square will be inaugurated in a special ceremony. Now, representatives from the US Embassy in Israel and lawmakers from Israel's Knesset are in attendance, with the mayor leading the ceremony. And our diplomatic correspondent, Ellie Hockenberg, is standing by in Petah Tikva. Ellie, what more can you tell us about this move to name a location in Trump's honour? We've really already seen it happen in other parts of the country.
Right, Sarah. So less than a month after Trump Heights in the Golan Heights, this honoring the American president for recognizing Israeli sovereignty over the Golan Heights. Now you get Trump Square here in the central Israeli city of Petah Tikva. It's the 5th largest city in Israel, and you can see it right here behind me, Donald Trump Square, and the sign says that it is for his acknowledgement of Jerusalem as Israel's capital. But obviously that joins a long row of pro-Israeli, historic, groundbreaking decisions on behalf of the American president. This is what Israeli Foreign Minister Israel Katz had to say before the ceremony earlier tonight.
And we thank and support President Trump about all the things that he have done for Israel. The recognition of Jerusalem as the capital of Israel, the relocation of the embassy, American embassy, to Jerusalem, the recognizing Israeli sovereignty on the Golan Heights, and canceled the dangerous nuclear agreement with Iran. For all those things, he have the right to get all the honor and the support from the mayor of Petah Tikva and from the country of Israel.
And Ellie, aside from lawmakers, you've been on the ground there for most of the afternoon. Tell me, what are you hearing from other people in regards to this move, both for and against?
Well, Sarah, it was a very festive ceremony. The American ambassador in Israel was invited. He could not attend, but there was a representation on behalf of the American embassy here. And let me just remind you that this event is taking place only a day after another historic event. That is the first time ever the American embassy was hosting its 4th of July celebrations in Jerusalem. After many years, it was held in Herzliya, in the outskirts of Tel Aviv. But a year after the relocation of the American embassy from Tel Aviv to Jerusalem, the 4th of July celebrations were held there yesterday. So indeed a very, very festive week here in Israel, hailing the close relationship between Israel and the United States, with the Trump Square right here behind me is the latest proof for that, Sarah.
Ellie Hockenberg there in Petah Tikva, thank you so much for bringing us up to date. Moving now to America and the growing backlash over President Trump's unprecedented plans for tomorrow's 4th of July celebrations. A parade, a concert and an unusual show of military force, with tanks and fighter jets set to roll down the National Mall. Now, the tanks and armoured vehicles are already in position just miles from the White House. Martha Radatz reports.
At the Lincoln Memorial today, workers hanging bunting and setting up the presidential podium for President Trump's unusual 4th of July address to the nation.
It's going to be about this country, and it's a salute to America.
A salute where the military will play a big part. The president has been fixated on a grand military display since he saw the Bastille Day celebration in France. Thursday's event on the National Mall will include military units and flyovers by Air Force One and the Blue Angels.
The best fighter jets in the world and other planes too. And we're going to have some tanks stationed outside.
Those tanks spotted today in Washington to the dismay of the city council, which tweeted, "Tanks but no tanks." They worry all the military hardware, even though the 60-ton tanks will be stationary, will damage the National Mall.
He is not respecting the traditions of this city and region, and it is much resented.
The administration won't say how much this will cost. The White House insists the extravaganza is about patriotism, not politics. And it is open to the public, although some VIP tickets have been given to the Republican National Committee to hand out. So far, nothing for Democrats.
And that is all we have time for this edition of I-24 News. But of course, we are continuing to bring you all of the breaking stories. So do go ahead and visit us online. That's i24news.tv. And we have all of those stories on all of our social media platforms. I'm Sarah Coates. Thanks for watching.